Welcome to A Court of Transformation and Awakening. I'm Lorrie Gray.
And I'm Amanda Grace Harrison.
And in today's episode, we are discussing
Chapter 43.
Chapter 43, Feyre's third and final trial. Oh my gosh. We were like leading up to this one. I'm like, I don't even know how we're going to talk about this one. There's just so much. And like, in our, in the general style of this podcast of really looking for metaphor, there's so much metaphor.
There's a lot here.
Which I think we've already decided this is one of those things where I'm going to say and then be like, should I have said that? But over within our community, I do think we will probably end up having something that is just based on this that we're still formulating, because there is so much in here that I think that we can draw from for our own journeys and our own lives. So we'll talk about it a little bit here, but just know that this will just be scratching the surface of how I think we can apply this. Okay, final task. Don't you love the beginning here? Their world rested on my shoulders. No pressure.
I think you meant the beginning where they make her put on her old stinky clothes.
Oh, I forgot about that part.
Why did they make her that just instantly puts her at such an, like, you're already not going to be at your best because they make you put on these clothes that were disgusting and reeking 3 months ago. They make you put them back on.
I'd almost forgot about that.
Such a gross detail.
That wasn't...
Nonetheless, she keeps her chin high, even in her filthy, reeking clothes. She keeps her chin high as she was escorted to the throne room.
Good for her. Who cares what you're wearing? Oh my gosh, don't we all care a little too much what we're wearing sometimes? I was at an event recently and I had to keep reminding myself, I'm like, nobody cares what you're wearing. Nobody cares what you're wearing. Nobody cares. Because like,
to have that little voice going, I shouldn't know this.
I mean, there have been like 3 events recently where, because we were traveling, I've mentioned this before, guys, but we all, my family and I did like a 1.5 years in an Airstream, and our nice clothes are still packed up.
Yeah.
And I got rid of a lot of stuff too. And so I keep putting off, like really replenishing my wardrobe because we're still like moving. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to buy a lot of stuff and then move it. But there have been like 3 events where we were supposed to dress nice. And I'm like, I don't have anything nice. Like, or it's all packed away and I just show up kind of quote unquote underdressed. And then I have to talk myself through, like, remembering literally nobody cares what you're wearing. It's fine. But I'm like, I'm so underdressed.
But at least you're not filthy and reeking.
I'm like,
your hair
I'm not filthy and reeking.
Clean.
Your hair is clean.
Your outfit is
clean. Mostly. Sometimes. But I'm like, I feel like I posted it somewhere and it's like for anybody, whoever needs to hear this today, your outfit is fine. I don't know what you're doing today when you're listening to this podcast.
What you're wearing, but it's fine.
Your outfit is fine. It's fine. Let's just stop worrying about that.
Somebody needed to hear it.
Somebody needed to hear that today. Okay. So
the world is just resting on her shoulders. That's all.
No big deal. But this was interesting. So as she's walking through, a few of them touched their fingers to their lips and then extended their hands to me, which was a gesture for the fallen, a farewell to the honored dead. And there was nothing malicious about it. And she realized, that this really was one of those things where, like, now we've got Lucien's brothers who seem to be like all on board Team Amarantha, but we've also got people who, like, she's realizing like everybody's trapped. Nobody wants to be here. And there is this, like, even though it doesn't seem like anybody thinks she's going to survive, like that they're for her. And I think that's good to know as she goes into this.
She has this thought, perhaps like Rhysand's, their oaths of allegiance to Amarantha and betting on my life and nastiness had been a show. And perhaps now that the end was imminent, they too would face my potential death with whatever dignity they had left. So she's realizing that some people are on her side. She's not alone. Not everybody is worshiping this evil queen.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, so we have this scene here where she gives her final goodbye. I love you, no matter what she says about it, no matter if it's only with my insignificant human heart. Even when they burn my body, I'll love you. Really is. You can see she is not planning to survive this.
Yeah.
And he doesn't react. Oh my gosh, but then this. You'll be lucky, my darling, if we even have enough left of you to burn. Oh. Oh.
But the beauty of Amarantha saying something so horrible is that her words were not met with jeers or smiles or applause from the crowd, as they would have been when Pharaoh was first brought under the mountain. They were met with only silence. It was a gift that gave me courage, that made me bunch my fists, that made me embrace the tattoo on my arm even. I had beaten her until now, fairly or not. She fully realizes she had to cheat on that second one. And I would not feel alone when I died. I would not die alone. It was all I could ask for.
Which is such a callback to the scene with the fairy, right? Because, and again, it's this, what started out is this clear us, them, humans, fairies. And so she starts with this moment where it didn't matter that it was a fairy that was dying. He was a living being, and she had this, nobody deserves to die alone. Yeah. And like, she's like, I wouldn't want to die alone. And I love that she's having this moment, how this comes full circle of, she's not, that these fairies are with her in some way, and she's able to feel that she's not going to be alone.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good.
At least there's that.
It does. It reminds me of the regrets of the dying. Like, I forget how many it is, where like this was so long ago. Was it a book or was it an article? Was it a whatnot? But somebody who spent a lot of time with people as they were passing went through, it's like the most common regrets of the dying and like what that looks like. Every once in a while I go back and I look at that list. And it's been, I don't know. It's interesting. I talk to some people, and because of like how dark their thoughts are, or some people's go-to line of thinking is that they're constantly thinking about death or dying, or like a fear of dying. So some people think of dying a lot. And I think there are some of us who don't think about it very often. But every once in a while, and even sometimes with a book like this, whenever a character has that moment where they're facing what they see as potentially dying, it gives me a minute. Like, it's one of those places where I do sometimes use that as a time just to stop and pause and think about the most common regrets of the dying and what they are, and if that was happening for me sooner rather than later, what would my regrets be? And sometimes these moments in books serve as a time for me to make small shifts if needed. I think because we were prepping for these chapters, actually this week I had so much stuff I needed to do. I'm like way behind on work projects. I'm not going to lie, guys, because we're spending so much time recording this podcast. There's a bunch of my other stuff that's like not getting done.
But you're also launching whole new things at the same time.
I'm launching a lot of things, but there's other things that are not getting done because I'm like, ooh, let's sit around and like record these podcast episodes. Wouldn't change a thing. But on Thursday, I was like, I only had oh my gosh, somehow I only had one coaching call. Oh yeah, I had people on vacation and different stuff happening. I had the whole day, and it was sort of I could get all these work projects done. And instead I took the whole day off and I spent it with my girls. Like, I did a date with Zoe where we went out to eat and we went shopping, and then did a date with Nadia, like 2 locations each, and like the whole day. And I was exhausted by the end and I think maybe it was because I was thinking about this, but whenever that's presented to itself, I'm like, yeah, like I'm not going to regret that I didn't get that thing out, but I would regret not spending that one-on-one time. And like doing a date with both of them has been on the calendar for weeks, and it keeps getting put off for work stuff. And it was a good, just kind of like a check moment. I'm like, no, between those two, I'm not going to look back at the end of it and say, I wish I'd spent more time working. Like, nobody gets to their deathbed and says, I wish I'd worked more.
Yeah.
And so, but I think that's like having those against like small course corrections more often than waiting till it's like 2 decades of being off course.
No, the girls are off living in another state, and you can't take them on a date.
Yeah.
Good job. Well done, you.
Thanks.
Celebrate that one.
Thanks. It was good. And it was so fun. My gosh, as they get bigger. I mean, I liked my kids when they were littler, obviously, like I've loved them at every stage, but gosh, I'm loving them being older and like having like conversations and hearing their thoughts. And they have, I mean, we talk about silly stuff and we talk about deep stuff, but like I am loving like getting to meet and get to know like the people that my kids are growing into as they're kind of like discovering themselves. It was such a good call. It was such a good call. Okay, back to this chapter though. So third task is here's three fairies,
Three innocent beings.
and she's very clear, she's like that it's innocent. She's like, not that that should matter to you. And basically what's presented to her is kill all three of them and you win, or don't and you lose.
And so does everyone else.
Uh-huh.
Easy decision. Easy decision, Sarah. Come on.
Okay, and this is so one of the things we talked about from the beginning is like, and even some people in our community that we've talked with, is the way that these books, and I think because it's sort of a scenarios that are so extreme, but it does present the opportunity for us to explore morality, explore kind of shades of gray, explore kind of our shadow selves, ask ourselves some like deep questions. But I'm like, when I tried to do some like deeper thought for myself in this situation or put myself in Feyre's shoes, I'm like, I felt like my brain just kind of broke.
Yeah.
Like to try to actually imagine being in this situation.
I was in just complete shock. This scene, I was just like, what?
I was too.
It's just too much.
Right? Because it's genuinely like there is no clear right. Like this is obviously not right. Like it's not okay. And it, it definitely brings up those questions of morality, of do the ends justify the means?
Yeah.
Ugh. I have no words, friends. I'm just going to sit here and make faces, which is not going to work very well for the podcast.
I'll read some bits while you make faces. Refuse and die. Kill 3 innocents and live. 3 innocents for my own future, for my own happiness, for Tamlin and his court, and the freedom of an entire land. I couldn't do it. It wasn't like hunting. It wasn't for survival or defense. It was cold-blooded murder, the murder of them, of my very soul. But for Prithian, for Tamlin, for all of them here, for Alice and her boys, I wished I knew the name of one of our forgotten gods so I might beg them to intercede. Wished I knew any prayers at all to plead for guidance, for absolution. It's so good when you don't even believe. You don't even know. Not only does she not believe in these gods, she doesn't even know their names or any of the prayers to them. But in this is the one moment when she's like, "Oh, I wish I had prayer to fall back on in this moment, so I could at least ask for help."
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I kind of want to just like jump around this chapter a little bit because it's so much metaphor. Okay, so what actually happens? Like hopefully, like you all reading this have read this, but she makes this decision that she's gonna do it. She decides that when we're weighing the lives of everybody being stuck under her rule versus actually killing 3 fairies, that she's going to do it. And so I want to come back and talk about each one, but she goes through with the first, she goes through with the second, and then, she gets ready to get to the third. She's like, it would be a relief. Like, basically, she's like, I can do this. I can do one more, but then maybe one more swing up and inward and into my own heart. It would be a relief to end it by my own hand. A relief to die rather than face this, what I'd done. And so it's like she makes a decision to do it, but it's like I'm willing to do it, but I'm not going to be able to live with myself afterwards. I mean, just like the depth of agony in the writing here and the situation that Sarah J. Maas has set up. I'm kind of not a fan of you right now, Sarah. Like this is just so painful. Oh my gosh. Okay, so before we get to the how do we want to do this? I'm like, I feel like I'm trying to like decide how I want to go through this chapter. So let's talk about like what happened, then we'll go back and discuss it. So she gets to this place where she goes through with number 1, she goes through with number 2, she's getting ready to go through number 3, but she's like, okay, I'll do this and then I'll just kill myself and it'll be over. And then we find out that the third is Tamlin. And it's like, no fair, no fair, no fair, because how can I possibly be killing a fairy to free him of his curse if I have to kill him?
So wrong.
It's so wrong. And it's like, ugh, it's just terrible. But then we'd had these drips all throughout of people saying like, you need to listen, like the eavesdropping moments. And she has this situation where she thinks she's putting it together, that perhaps his heart is actually literally made out of stone. And like she has to just make this call, and in the end she does decide to drive a stake through his heart as well. I love this final line. I love you, I said, and stabbed him. What a good way to end. Okay, so this is her trial. This is awful. So that's what actually happened. Okay. Tell me, like, and I think we've talked about this before, but so there's like the actual morality of this. I feel like there's so many places we could go with like deep understanding of ourselves, of what we would do in this situation, and exploring a lot of things. But I feel like there's a ton of metaphor in this that we've talked about a little bit. But when you see all of this, like what comes up for you, like in terms of metaphor for this? Or like what's coming up for you in these chapters, or in this chapter?
Man, I was just so in shock. And when she finally, after even the person in the audience is crying, she's like, okay, this is somebody who's loved. It's not just like it keeps getting worse and worse. And then when she actually plunges the ash dagger, I just was like, there's a moment that says everything in me fractured or something like that. I'm like, that was me. I was just like, what?
I can't believe she did this.
I genuinely thought she was not going to kill these beings.
Right.
And then she does. And I'm like,
oh my gosh. Right. Like, I feel like that's one of those things where I think I was expecting there to be a third alternative.
Yeah. There's going to be something the lamb else in the bush. There's going to be something.
No. And then when she actually drove that stake through the first heart, I was like, I also had a moment of like, wait, what? Like there's not
That's where we're going with this.
There's nobody to jump in and save us. Like we're actually going to kill innocents to break this curse. What? Okay. So in terms of right, wrong in this situation is such deep morality, but one of the things I've just done is stepped back and gone to something that's much more general metaphor. And from there, I've actually found some helpful things in this. So let's kind of explore that a little bit. So the whole point of her doing this is to break the curse. That's the whole point. Like if you do this, the curse on everybody is broken, which for me, part of the reason that I've liked this is, here she's doing curse breaking, but I've always turned this metaphorically into cycle breaking, right? And I've connected with everything that she's done and all of her story. For me, it's all been, at least in book 1, a large metaphor for cycle breaking and what that looks like. And I think from that space, I can see a lot of deep truths in here. And even this idea of, at the end, I was just going to kill myself. Because part of breaking cycles, it's not just about changing belief. It's not just about changing action. It's not just about like showing up differently. I think that there is that question of like, are we willing to let the version of ourselves that we've known and understood ourselves to be, are we willing to let that die? And I think whether it's cycle breaking or anything, like whenever we decide to evolve and become the next version of ourselves, as much as that sounds beautiful, it's actually much more painful and heart-wrenching, and it doesn't always feel great. Like we have this metaphor of like becoming a butterfly. I'm like, if anybody's ever actually studied how this works, it's a gruesome process.
So gross.
You go into a
complete breakdown until they're not even a being at all anymore. They're just goop.
Liquid goop before it actually forms into a butterfly. And like, in this moment of like her shattering and breaking, I'm like, I think there is so much metaphorical truth in what it actually looks like to break cycles or become the next version of ourselves. And, it's like there are things we have to let go of, and there are things we have to let die, including like our place and our family, all the way back to like chapter 2, like the homeostasis that's there. Like, we're gonna rock the boat, we're gonna upset people, we're gonna burn bridges, relationships are going to be complete, how we've always thought of ourselves, how we've seen ourselves, how we've understood ourselves to be in the world, like genuinely breaking cycles and becoming the next version of ourselves is it's letting an identity die and stepping into that new version of ourselves. It's that part sounds great, but people miss that becoming a new version of yourself means the old version of yourself has to die.
Yeah. And it can't just be things, so you have to kill your darlings. It can't just be things like, oh, I'm going to have to kill and then something that you really want to get rid of anyways.
Right.
Because it's like, oh, I'm going to have to kill procrastination. I'm going to have to kill this. But these are, it's not like that. This is something genuinely good.
Right.
Like the whole concept of you have to kill the good to get to the great, and then you have to kill the great to get to the excellent. This is good. It's not bad stuff that we're killing off, which would make it so much easier. Like, oh, okay, this is obvious. Obviously, I need to stop doing this bad habit in order to achieve this goal. But these are genuinely good things that are like a really hard call.
And that was, and I was looking at I was thinking about some of the metaphor between like the three, the three deaths, and we've got this first fairy that's like weeping.
Yeah.
Don't do it. Right. Like, don't do it. And I'm like, yeah, what are those things that, like, there are certain things that we have to let go of, and they don't go easy. Like, there are the things where it's like, okay, I need to step out of this, but it's like kicking and screaming, and it's painful and it's awful, and what that looks like and what that means for us, and like what those things are, the ones that are there are things that are so hard to get rid of, like, and to let go of. And I'm thinking about this second fairy who, like, there's so much bravery there of like, she was like ready to go.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that has been interesting, because there have been aspects of this where, there are some things where I'm like, okay, this is a thing that I know I need to let go of, or kill, metaphorically, to step into the next version of myself. And it's so hard. And then there are other things where it does feel much more this like peaceful, like honorable, gosh, I'm like ready. Like, I'm ready to let that go. And it really feels like a releasing, and there's something, beautiful in that. But not all of them, right? Like, not all of them. And and then when I think about, and then we've got, this third one, which again is just way complicated. But that sometimes the things that we have to let go of are what you were just saying. It's not something bad. It's that good is the enemy of great. And what does that look like? And what does stepping into the next version of ourselves look like? And it's not always getting rid of something that's awful and terrible. And even with relationships, I was thinking about, when it comes to cycle breaking, it would be easier if the world was actually split into good people and villains. And it's not. The world's not split into like, oh, this person is clearly evil and awful 100% of the time, so it's super easy to cut them out. It's not always that. Sometimes it's not even bad. And like, convincing my clients of this, like, sometimes they'll be in a relationship where it's not serving them, but it's also not bad. And those are the relationships that I see people have the hardest time leaving, because there's nothing they can point to of like, this is truly awful. It's like, okay, well, this doesn't work great, but I understand and I have compassion. It's not really that bad. I could just adjust my mindset or whatever. And it's not terrible, or the job isn't terrible, or the situation isn't terrible. And if it's not terrible, then they have trouble justifying the pain they're going to cause to everybody and the upheaval that's going to happen by leaving. And that understanding that we can make a choice to leave a situation that's not bad. We can choose to leave a situation that's good. We can choose to leave something that's okay, because we have to like prune and make space for great. And that it doesn't, we don't have to wait till it becomes awful to be able to move outside of it. But that's hard. It's hard to move away from a thing for those reasons, I think, just because of how we're all raised. But that shift to, what if we weren't like waiting for it to be awful? Like, what if we were just willing to move towards our best good, and like that to be enough motivation?
Not easy.
It's not easy. No. Yeah, but I see people like, it's like, well, this job isn't great, but like nothing really bad has happened. This relationship isn't great, but nothing really bad has happened. I don't think that's the compass I want to live my life by. But it makes sense in the moment. Like, it feels like it makes sense because it's like, because but again, where does that come from? Like the idea of like, if I make this choice, I need to be able to, it's almost like I think we're expecting to be questioned or judged by other people. It's like, no, I have to have a solid case that really justifies my actions. And for most of us, the answer of, because I wanted to, because I chose to, because this is the decision that felt like it was best for me and more my highest good and my best good. In our society, that has not been allowed to be the answer that a woman is allowed to give. It's like, why did I do it? I did it for me. It's like, no, you're meant to serve like everybody else around you. It's like, yeah, how well is that working out? I did this for me because I wanted to, because I chose to, because it was for my best good. It's like, what if that could be a reason that we choose?
That'd be amazing. That's how that would be. But I can't relate.
I'm only just now getting, I think I'm only getting, but that's the thing, like the version of us that's the good girl. The version of us that's lives within the lines that, society says you're allowed to take up exactly this much space and don't step outside of it. And even our nervous systems that are like, stepping outside of that's unsafe. Like, I think that's the part for this for me. I'm like, oh my gosh, like that version of me, it's not just about changing habits. It's not just about like, what are the things in my life that I need to adjust? I'm like, what's the version of me that I have to let die to be able to step into that? And yeah, just like this chapter is painful. Like, that's not easy. And I think it's that honesty of like, anytime we decide like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna go do this thing, it's like, are we actually stopping and counting the cost? Like, what is it going to cost us? And I'm not talking about like giving up evening TV. The amount of people who like, that's the solution, by the way. The amount of people who are like, I'm going to do this thing. I'm like, okay, how are we going to make that happen? I could just quit watching TV in the evening. And I'm like, don't do that.
Never say that.
Never say that. You need to watch Stranger Things at night. We all do, for the good of humanity. And I'm not talking about those kinds of things. Like, and honestly, I don't think anybody ought to give up their downtime or their chill time. I think that that's really important to keep most of the time. But it's actually much more subtle and nuanced than that. Like, what it is actually going to cost us to move ahead with our dreams, and step into this next version of ourselves. Like, it's things like, I'm going to have to give up having everyone like me.
Yep. Definitely have to give that one up because it's not possible anyway.
It's not possible anyway, but gosh, most of us so many people have put their whole identity into making that happen. And the next evolution of us, it's like having to let that go as an identity as a whole. Cycle breaking is hard work. It's freeing work. And that's the thing, like, it is freeing, but I love that metaphor of the butterfly. It's like, yeah, like breaking out of the cycles, breaking out of the patterns, breaking the curses. It's not beautiful. It's not, the actual process of it is very painful. But I think when people don't recognize that, then they show up and it's like, this hurts, this sucks, this feels uncomfortable, I'm trying to become this next version of myself, but everything feels awful and painful right now, can make us think like something's gone wrong. But like when you go into it knowing like, yeah, that's what it looks like. It's a version of you dying so you can become the next version of yourself, and every bit of that's super uncomfortable, and that's exactly how it goes. Okay, so this feels terrible, but nothing's gone wrong. Like, yeah, nothing's gone wrong.
I love that. For the rest of our lives, we will have this chapter as the reminder that it's not supposed to feel warm and fuzzy when you're killing off whatever it is that you need to kill off to break these cycles. It's not supposed to be the warm, fuzzy day.
Yeah.
Watching the clouds overhead. It's dark and brutal and shattering and all of the horrible things.
It is. And also, you know, I think worth it. And I'm excited, you know, to look into the next chapters, you know, and see what happens here. But, you know, Feyre wasn't unaware before she moved forward. Like, she took a minute and she really kind of understood what was happening here, and she decided it was worth it. And I think that's the thing. It's like when we look at becoming the next version of ourselves, breaking out of those cycles, like nobody's saying it's going to be easy. But one of the things that's always helped me is the understanding that, yeah, cycle breaking, becoming this next version of myself, it's hard, but it's hard now. Like staying where we're at is hard now, and it's really like you get to choose your hard. Do you want this hard or do you want that hard? And one of the phrases that's been helpful for me is the concept of like next level problems. You know, and I'm like, I like the problems I have right now, I'm very familiar with. I've been kind of like, I've hung out with them long enough. They're familiar, and I'm kind of over them, and I'm willing to step out of that. And I know that moving into the next season is going to bring about its own set of struggles and its own set of problems, but they're next level problems. And I would rather have the problems that come with, oh my gosh, I made so much money and how do I deal with it ethically, than the version of me that's like struggling with like, how do I pay my bills? Now both create problems.
Yeah.
Honestly, they do. But I want the next level problems, and I would rather have the pain of transformation than the pain of staying the same. But like understanding that both are hard, and I'm getting to pick my hard was helpful.
Yeah, that next level problems mentality is so important, because it is so easy to think on this level I have problems. When I break into the next level, life is going to be sunshine and roses, and I will be past that.
Yeah.
But every level brings with it bigger, higher stakes.
Yeah.
The problems don't go away. They just shift
change
into something new and different. And now who you are is new and different and able to handle that challenge. But if you could see it now, you wouldn't even go there. You'd be like, I don't want to go to the next level.
It's so true.
I can't handle that.
And like an understanding that, yeah, the externals may change, but I think really relating it to emotional balance was the most helpful thing, where it's like you're going to experience about the same level of happiness and emotions once you get there as you are here. And there's like that initial, there's so many phrases for it, you know, upper limit, like the hedonistic treadmill, whatever. But basically, we're all about as happy as we choose to be, no matter what the circumstances are. And if you take somebody and something extreme happens, like either it's like I won the lottery or I lost my ability to walk, you know, something like that, whether it's, you know, what we think of as an extreme good or an extreme bad, after the initial change, people's emotional happiness goes back to about what it was. Like the externals never change it. And really understanding like, oh, okay, so the things are going to change, but I'm going to be about as happy there as I am now. That shifted everything for me. And like understanding that like I'm not going to a place of greater happiness. Like that's not how that works. I don't think it really, okay, so that was one of those things where like I'd heard and I understood in my mind, right? Like I understood in my mind. But in my coaching business, like when I started coaching, it was like, okay, you know, there's sort of like as coaches, like coaches who are really making it, or coaches who make like six figures, they're making like this amount of money, you've got a full roster, you've got this sort of thing. And I think I had in my mind, right, whenever I'm making six figures and have a full roster, then like the, you know, the gates of heaven open up and like
everything else will be
like
taken
singing.
care of.
And I and I heard this teaching, and I kept trying to use this teaching to like balance it out and to like not be in scarcity and not be in a rush. But I don't think, again, I got it intellectually on some level, like I understood it intellectually on some level, but like I didn't actually get it until I got there. And you know what happens when your roster gets full?
What happens, Lorrie?
You have to tell people no.
No, don't say it.
Like I had people on my roster who I'd had on there like at discounts, and like people who I knew their time was done, like, and there were people who had to make the decision of being like sort of ending certain relationships that I like, that their time needed to be done or my time needed to be done, or people showing up and wanting to work with me and me having to say no and like not having space to say yes to people. Or for a while I tried to say yes and then my schedule got out of control and having to say no to people. And I was like and then like people were like, hey, can I like reschedule? I'm like, I can't reschedule. I don't have a single open slot to put you in. And suddenly I couldn't be as flexible with people. I couldn't be as accommodating. I'm turning people away. I'm telling people no. And as much as I was like, oh my God, like when my roster's full, I'm like, oh, like this created a different set of problems. And again, I preferred those problems, but I really didn't like it because like I enjoy being accommodating, like, and I love being able to be flexible with clients. When somebody's like, oh my gosh, I'm running late, I'm like, totally fine, let's just like move it. I love being able to be flexible in that way. And like suddenly I couldn't, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I really disliked it. And I had one of those moments of, oh, I knew this was coming, but I didn't realize it until I got there. I'm like, I actually have about the same amount of mental drama and negative emotion over different things. And like that was so hard for me, for people to be like, oh my gosh, like I'd really like to work with you, and you have to say like, I'm sorry, I don't have space. Anyway, so yeah, so all of this, knowing it in our head and like really knowing it is different. But I think even just talking about it in theory and like reminding ourselves of it, that yeah, we're still going to have problems whenever we get to the future place. We're still going to have hard times. We're still going to experience negative emotions. And when you know that, it's helpful, because when we have this idea of like, I will let myself be happy when I get to this point, I will let myself relax once I reach this point, and it's never that way.
Damn it.
By the way, speaking of like letting like the version of ourselves, like the good, like the version of ourselves that everybody likes, or like letting old versions of us die. So we put out some of these podcast episodes. My daughter is listening to some of them, right? So she's reading the books and she's listening to this. And then she got to an episode and she was like, Mom, I just listened to this episode and you dropped an F-bomb. And I was like, did I? She was like,
I was reading it from the book though, right?
I don't think that one it was. And I was like, oh, did I? And she was like, you did not mark this episode as explicit.
Oh.
So I was like, we had to go back on a lot of these podcast episodes.
I saw all the little, that was the first thing I noticed actually when I went. I'm like, look, it's our official podcast. We have a lot of explicit marks.
I was like, oh my goodness, we just created a podcast that we had to mark as explicit. And like my like inner church going, like Midwest Bible Belt good girl was like, ooh, great. Oh, like, and it was kind of like a, oh my gosh, that's awful. Oh, that's kind of like, love that. Oh my gosh, like, do I, and like, and it's like the part of me that still wants to hold on to like who I was, and the part that's like who I'm becoming. And like the version of me that I'm becoming is a little more sweary.
Yeah.
Okay, no, she's a lot more sweary. I just read something the other day, and it was like, I have some version out there of like, there's a lot of words out there, but sometimes only the F-bomb will do. And I'm like, sometimes it's just the right word. Sometimes it's just the right word. So any inner church-going good girl-ness that we were letting go of, she died a little bit whenever we went through and we marked
dagger through the heart.
Whenever we marked explicit on this podcast content. Look at us. Look at us breaking cycles, friend. Oh my goodness. Okay, so end chapter 43, guys. Okay, so that was a huge, intense chapter. And I wish I could say that was kind of the conclusion, but Chapter 44 is about to get even more intense.
It's a bit more intense.
And then we've only got 3 chapters left. Okay. We got to end this one so we can get the other ones recorded, guys. Okay. Okay. We'll see you back here
All right.
really soon.
43, guys. Thanks so much for watching. And if you have not already done so, please motor on over to our community at ACOTAR. That's ACOTAA.circle.so, so you can jump into our community and get a little more involved in what we have going on there. We'll see you there. Bye.
Bye.